Okay, welcome back here to the Great Lakes School of Turfgrass Science, everybody. Joining me tonight, Dr. Brian Horgan, department head over at, what's your department called over there, Brian?
Plant, soil, microbial sciences. It's like a combination of crops, soils, and pathology.
Yeah. So over at Michigan State University. So very pleased to have Dr. Horgan joining us on board here tonight. A lot going on lately. It's probably
for sure.
pretty crazy in your respective areas of the states, depending on what the current status is, I guess. But we just certainly wish you all well. And, if there's anything we can do to help you out from a turfgrass management point of things, we're here for you. And we're certainly all ears. We've
well, just also keep in mind and put things into perspective too. We're all trying to do our best on a day-to-day basis, but you might have customers and clients or bosses whose mindset is just not there right now. So just be patient with people, a little bit more patient than you normally are. And then that's going to help everybody get through this.
That's right. Yeah. And if you do have an opportunity to get out there and do some of these maintenance practices we're talking about, try to pick your most important practices that'll buy you some time as well. To me, it might be pre-emergence, this time of year, depending on where
you're testing.
Yeah. A lot of different things to think about anyway. So we'll keep this like all Wednesday nights. We'll keep it informal here. I just have a couple house cleaning things here, and then we'll get into a little bit of discussion with Dr. Horgan. So we're in session 10. It's amazing to think of how quickly it went. It always goes quick every winter and into spring, I guess, Brian. But this is the second year that we've offered the grounds, sports turf edition of the Great Lakes Turf School. So hopefully everybody's found value in it to this point. It seems like through the quizzes, at least, most of you are keeping up pretty well with the school activities. So in session 10 here, just the final remaining things to do are that post test, which is the same exact questions that you did on the pre-test. And we're looking to try to identify your knowledge gained throughout the course. That's why we ask kind of the same questions there. But get that post-test done. And then even more important to us than the post-test is that final evaluation. It won't take you more than 5 minutes, I don't think. But we're always trying to improve the turf school. We put this on for you folks. So any way we can improve, get better, please be vocal on there and let us know. If the timing didn't work out for you for the live Wednesday night sessions, let us know what would be a better live timing. We didn't have a lot of you joining us live, but from just the YouTube video views, it seems like majority of you have been able to keep up with the content. So definitely hit that evaluation and spend a little bit of time there to give us your constructive feedback. Is kind of what we're looking for on that. So I wanted to start, Brian, and you might have a few things here, but I wanted to start by just 3 things that I was really grateful for or pleased with the Great Lakes Turf School, the grounds edition this year. So number 1 on my list, just the quality of our instructors, folks like Dr. Horgan. We also had, Dr. Doug Soldat from Wisconsin create some material for us this year and joined us live as well. Dr. Frank Rossi from Cornell, Dr. Aaron Patton from Purdue University, and then Dr. Chris Williamson, Dr. Paul Koch from Dr. Williamson's with PBI Gordon. As you all know, Dr. Paul Koch is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So feel very grateful, very honored to have this group of instructors and just their knowledge here for you folks. Number 2.
Wait. You got to stop for a second.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, stop for a second. Because you're totally throwing yourself under the bus. Now, I know you're not going to sit there and talk about yourself, but you just listed off 5 or 6 people. But your knowledge and what you do to organize this and the way that you bring everybody together and also participate, Sam. You ask good questions. You've got really good thought process. So a little stroke for you. And now I'm going to get off it.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks much. Number 2 here, wide range of participant demographics, a lot of different experiences as well. It was a quiet group this year. Not exactly sure what the reason for that was. A lot of this stuff, if you're new to the industry, it might be new for you. It might be a little intimidating. So we certainly understand and appreciate that. But definitely as you leave the turf school and as you still continue to work through the content here, definitely keep in touch as you go throughout your career and let us know, Dr. Horgan, Dr. Soldat is the other co-creator of the school along with myself. So definitely reach out to us if we can help you out. And then in today's day and age, I'm very thankful also for the online format. With the current crisis we're dealing with, as you all saw, the Great Lakes Turf School, we didn't skip a beat. So we'll keep going with the online format here, and it allowed a lot of you from different areas of the country to join. So that's great. A few things I think we could do better. I think we can definitely improve the timing of live discussions. I was a little disappointed to see, just a handful of people joining live on Wednesday nights. I realize you might not necessarily get paid to join on Wednesday nights. So, there might be a timing factor that we can do better, whether it's mornings or even daytime. We could call them lunch and learns type of thing, during the day if it makes more sense at work. Brian, I'm not sure if you have a comment along those lines.
Hey, and they don't need to see our face too. So we could throw these up as podcasts and let them, as they're driving in their truck, do 20-minute podcast segments every week on the topic, and let that be this interactive phase between instructors. They don't need to see us.
Right.
So that would be an opportunity too, to engage around a topic with different faculty from around the Great Lakes region.
That's a great thought. Great thought. So definitely give us your comments there on the timing. I think we could probably I sent out a weekly email encouraging questions, but I definitely think we could get you to think a little bit more critically and try to engage you with some of the challenges you're seeing. So we'll work on that. If you have any ideas there, for the participants here, let us know on that. And then also, I think, as Brian mentioned, I love the podcast idea. But my other thought is to try to bring in a practitioner on some of our live discussions as well, somebody who spends a lot of time out in the field and deals day to day with these practices, and they can kind of reel us back in, Brian, on our ideal world scenario education side of things of what we'd like to see, but then that practitioner aspect would also be valuable to try to put some practical experience around that.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah. Okay. So those are kind of my three things on each category there. Then definitely, if you're joining us live, a few of you are joining us live, ask us any questions, or if anything was unclear, feel free anytime throughout this live discussion to ask anything you can. But what I did, and I'm going to challenge Dr. Horgan here a little bit, what I did is I pulled each topic from each session and I put in my 3 takeaways. Some of them are takeaways that I gathered just from the professors. They're the expert in the field, and what were their most important things to pass on to you. Some of them are my mind of what I think you should really be thinking about for each of these topics. So we're just going to kind of work through this for each topic. Brian, let's start with session 1, turfgrass identification, selection, and establishment. I taught that lecture. It's a huge topic to start off with. It certainly is, but hopefully, with the lecture and with the resources we provided, everything became more clear as you got through some.
Okay, so before you pull it up on the screen, grass ID, right plant or right grass species in the right place, and so know your soil, shade maybe,
from
sites or
from an establishment point of view.
Yeah,
something like that.
We'll pull it up. Let's see.
Okay, so here's what I came up with, and these are just really to high level overview. Okay, we went through each of these sessions, and a lot of it was new information for you, and your head might have been spinning, and you can save all of those lectures as well. So I definitely encourage you to download and save those and revisit those. But this is to try to reel everybody back and try to just put some context around this. So here are my 3. So number 1, I say we must learn how to identify grasses and grassy weeds. I realize it might have been daunting. It might have been a daunting conversation initially if it's new to you. But how do you create a maintenance program, Brian, if you don't even know what grasses you have? You can't just take your client's word for it was planted with bluegrass 20 years ago, or who knows. But in addition to this, most of the grassy weeds we deal with are misidentified. And we talked about that rough bluegrass conversation, right? Where it's number 1 misdiagnosed issue in Minnesota. People think it's grubs, and it's just a wrong grass. So that's number 1 for me.
Well, I also think, Sam, that your comment that most lawns have been around for a long time, and someone will tell you, yes, it's a Kentucky bluegrass lawn, but the overseeding or the spring where you had some winter kill or some damage from an insect in the middle of the summer, and you go buy a bag of seed and you go sprinkle it out there, and you get some of it to take. You can stand back at a yard and look across and see modeling and different colors, and oftentimes that's just an indication that nothing is uniform out there. So yes, you have to be able to identify your grasses, and even more specifically, the grassy weeds that tend to provide a cover, but not necessarily the function that you're looking for. So yes.
Right. And what was I going to say? At some point in time, if you spend enough time with it, Brian, you'll agree, it just becomes second nature to you. You got to get down to the nitty gritty and start peeling the plants apart to start with. But then it'll get to the point when you're standing on a patch of grass, you don't even need to bend over. You know what you're dealing with. And a lot of it just comes with experience, I think. I
think so. And it is a little daunting, because pulling a grass blade apart and trying to look for a ligule, or trying to look for an auricle, or trying to look for a waxy surface on the underside of a leaf. I mean, all those things can be somewhat subjective when your eye is untrained to looking for it. So, that little microscope, did you show that in the lecture, Sam? That little handheld, thing that you put to your eye? And
maybe not.
Maybe we'll put a link up here for where you can go buy one. But if you really want to impress your customer, go pull some grass up, know what you're talking about, but get your little microscope out, get your glasses on, and take a look at it and start peeling it apart and saying, yeah, no, we got a bunch of ryegrass in here.
Yeah. Okay. So then number 2 here for me, so purchase high quality seed. And there's just so much junk seed out there. And when I say high quality seed, you definitely want to avoid fillers, right, Brian? If those 50% super absorbent coating type of things, that's the seed company trying to make some money off of you by putting inert matter in the bag, and we talked about that. But I really feel there's overutilization of ryegrass in my area. So if you're looking for high quality seed, number 1, be sure your mixtures, your percentages of the different species is appropriate for your environment, right? So I've been recommending for general lawn care, 80% fescue and 20% Kentucky bluegrass. And it ends up, just the way things work out, it kind of shakes out to be about 50-50.
50-50, yeah.
And it's been really nice. It's been really, but if I were to add 20% ryegrass to that mix, the number of challenges I would have been dealing with to get a nice lawn due to that sloughing off or the die off of ryegrass over time is something I really don't want to deal with. But
yeah, and in our neck of the woods, though, Sam, I mean, with winters not being what you are experiencing in Minnesota, ryegrass is more of a staple and at higher percentages. So know where you're at, know what the grass species, the stresses are that are imposed upon those grasses, what their lifespan looks like, given the different stress tolerances, and then pick appropriately.
Yeah, and then we obviously stressed the importance of good variety selection as well. Turfgrass breeders have really come a long way and tried to improve varieties from stress tolerance and quality and all that type of thing. So if I can, just talk about varieties in 5 seconds, avoid the really bad ones. Go to that NTEP program, the National Turfgrass Evaluation Program, go to the different university extension programs and see what their variety list looks like. Go all the way to that bottom of the list and be sure you're not buying the worst one. More times than not, you'll find that dominates the marketplace.
Well, and also know that tomorrow's varieties are better than today's. So you've gotten accustomed to, here are the 5 things that you like to put into your blend or to your mixture. It's like shopping for insurance. You can't just have the same insurance agent for your entire life, or else you're getting screwed. So make sure you're always going back and checking that in the off season of what are the newer varieties that are coming out.
That's funny that you mentioned that. I actually had a conversation the other day with somebody from the Scott's company. We're finally seeing Roundup Ready Kentucky Bluegrass come out now too. So it's amazing what changes in a year. I didn't realize it was on the marketplace, but that's a topic for another day. I shouldn't have opened that can of worms, I suppose.
Well, it's Roundup Ready, but there are other GMO, which is the low-mow, shade-tolerant Kentucky Bluegrass, is also equally as impressive.
Sure. So pay attention to it. And then last here for establishment, don't skimp on the establishment principles is what I'll say there. That's kind of an all-encompassing, I guess. But the main principle to me, and I've made the mistake time and time again, and I always kick myself for it, is planting a new lawn at the wrong time of year. And I know we recommend maybe spring, second or third, but I'm always going to prefer fall. Always going to prefer, for our area here anyway, September-ish, early September, Labor Day. Time and time again, when I've tried to do a new establishment in May, I seem to be fighting weeds all year long. It's just way more effort than it's worth to get it to where it needs to be. So don't forget the principles. Season is probably most important to me.
Yeah, but you could pick the right season and skip all the other 9 steps and have a crappy lawn. Right. So your point, keep it up there, is that follow all of them. Don't skip step 4 just because you don't think you need to do it. If you stick in that 1 through 10, you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah. Just a comment here. So Colin mentioned, I appreciate Colin's been pretty active on our live discussions as well. He's in Iowa. He says, just speaking for myself, but I'm new to the professional world of turf care. Didn't quite know what questions to ask until we really got into the live discussions. But Colin's been on board most Wednesday nights here,
okay,
and been asking as we go along. That's really the idea, for the other participants here. If we had a more appropriate time for doing these live discussions for you, it's really fun to kind of go along and get questions and answer them as we get them. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for that, Colin. All right, moving on to soils here. So session 2 taught by Dr. Soldat from Wisconsin. The 3 most important takeaways from his lecture for me, right here. So, and then Doug stressed this time and time again, and I really appreciate it. So focus less on the chemical properties and more on the physical properties. Let's start there. And he talks about the fact that chemical properties are easy to measure, Brian, right? But most of the issues we deal with from a soil standpoint relate to physical properties, right? Poor texture, lack of organic matter, poor drainage, that type of thing. So
you tend to get into the really high maintenance scenario when chemical properties become a limiting factor for you to get to that premier surface. And that could be an athletic field, or it could be a high grounds, somebody that's got that immaculate yard where a homeowner is entertaining and, the rich and famous people. But you're right, Sam. The 99% of the time with our homeowner customers, parks, lawns, cemeteries, etc., the physical properties drive all of this.
Yeah, so we can't stress that enough. And then one of the physical properties here, drainage capacity, I guess. Doug stressed the importance of drainage. So think about that. We're talking about surface drainage, subsurface drainage. Pretty challenging to make any type of sustainable turf system where the soils don't drain there. I forget his exact quote, but he said, you need good knowledge and good drainage or something to grow grass. If you're short on the former, you need more of the latter, something like that. So if you're short on the knowledge thing, just add more drainage, is kind of one of Doug's things. And then finally, don't underestimate the importance of organic matter. This is especially for poor quality soils that we're talking about. So, Doug showed some of his research where they're top dressing with compost on soils that might have organic matter percentages, Brian, at 2-3%, and seeing some pretty dramatic improvements with that.
Huge. So, yeah. Half inch twice a year for 3 years, and you can make that go from bad to really good.
Yeah. So think about that. Our caution to you would be, you don't want to layer a bunch of it on the surface. If there's any way you can try to get it down into your profile, the more in the profile, the better, whether it's in conjunction with core aerating, I suppose, Brian.
Yeah, but even then, Sam, I mean, if you're dealing with a clay soil where a cultivator or your soil probe can only go in, a half an inch, don't say, well, I can't put it on the surface. Then I would just start layering the stuff on the surface in those clay soils, and you'll start to see that improved soil health over time.
Yeah. So we're typically, recommending organic matter for sandy soils. It helps hold water, helps hold nutrients. For heavy clay soils, we also recommend organic matter. it helps with drainage,
Sure.
air exchange, I guess, Brian, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. Without anything else on soils here, we'll just keep moving along. And again, feel free to add any questions, gang, if something piques your interest here. So we'll pull that down. I've got irrigation here. Let's see. So session 3 was irrigation. I taught that session. Very passionate topic of mine, as you all probably found. You had to listen to that 2-hour lecture from me. But I do think so. Here are the 3. I think water conservation will be the biggest focus in the future. So any way you can get better with water management, that'll help tell a better story of our industry. I think, we all cry water when we're in a drought, and then when we get some rain, it goes off our mind, right? And there are some local issues that trip my mind in thinking about that. White Bear Lake, for example, and it's not, the water levels aren't receding anymore, so we're back to a good status. But water conservation, water is a finite resource to some extent, and we got to be sure we do as good with it as we certainly can. We don't need to give the anti-lawn folks any ammo to throw at us. Additionally, I'll say, don't be resistant to irrigation technology. There are a lot of neat tools out there, and I know, Brian, you've worked on a lot of these soil moisture sensors, rain set, that type of thing, smart irrigation controllers. We collaboratively worked a lot on that together at the U of Minnesota. But a lot of it's easy to install. It can save your clients a ton of money.
They're cheap.
They're cheap.
They are cheap, and there is a huge upmarket where you can install something that saves a bunch of money, show return on investment, but charge double for the product. And I'm not saying you're gouging at this point, but you are providing a service that's going to save money. And you can use that as a way in which you can drive business by showing a return on investment, but it's a chance for a profit margin.
What type of technology would you think has the most potential, Brian, to
start with the controller?
Okay.
Got to start with the controller, because if you start with sensors, then you're relying on sensors to be able to communicate with something that it can't communicate with. So you just swap out the controller, get it so that it can take in some weather data, make it so that you can control it on your phone, so you don't have to go out to your garage or change the dial. That no one knows how to use those controllers that have those crazy dials that are all over inside there. Yeah, I'm all over just changing the sensor or the controller.
I like that idea, and that also brings to mind now the controllers. I mean, for $100, you can get a controller added on for one of your homeowners you're dealing with, and you can control that remotely from your phone as well.
That's right.
How am I blanking? I'm Rainbird has that ability. Certainly, Toro does as well. But I'm blanking on one of the more common ones. I'm just looking at my apps here to try to remember what Rockio. Yeah, the Rockio controllers. They're $100, $150. And we've used those effectively, control them right from our phone. So
absolutely,
if you know it's raining in your area, you can wake up that morning or go to bed that night, anticipation of rain, and just shut all your clients down.
I mean, look, I'm on this kick right now of return on investment and being able to provide services to your clients. But if you told your clients you're going to manage their water for them too,
and that's a service. That might be an extra 5 minutes of your time, right, on a daily basis, if that.
5 minutes of your time, and you're giving better product. You're not overwatering. You're saving them money, and you're doing it for next to nothing in time.
Yeah. And then my last point here on just the irrigation, more harm can come from overwatering than underwatering. We did studies here in Minnesota, newly sodded Kentucky bluegrass. Our control treatment was no supplemental irrigation at all. There were times of the year where it got dry. It looked a little bit rough, but it always rains. And by the end of the growing season, it looked better and more prepared for a drought, I suppose, than the well-watered plots. So I say that just for those homeowners that you're dealing with mowing issues from things being too wet, not able to fertilize, whatever it may be, any way you can reduce the water on those automatic irrigation systems. Is there a lawn in the country, Brian, that needs to be watered every other day, as most city ordinances are indicating? Maybe somewhere, Colorado.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I think we're used to it, Sam. We expect it. John down the street's watering. Shoot, I should put mine on if John's watering. I mean, keeping up with the Joneses. I think one of the best ways that you can avoid overwatering when it's most detrimental to the plant is wait to turn on your irrigation system.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Just wait. Don't do it all March 1st or April 1st. Wait a month. Wait 2 months. Because the longer you wait, the more tolerant that plant becomes to the imposing stresses of the summer. The deeper the roots get. Yeah, I mean, everything just gets better the longer you wait to get that water on that surface.
Yeah. Great stuff. Okay, so that's what we had for irrigation. I know a lot of you probably don't manage it, but if you are dedicated to one type of property, then it's certainly under your control. And shut it off. I think you'll be surprised at how long your turf survives without it. You know, and we all know when those dry, hot days are. We haven't had rain for 3, 4, 5 days or a week. You know, we all know when that's kind of coming, and we can anticipate that. So,
yep.
Brian, you taught our fertility lecture, and you know, again, another one of those topics that for newbies in the industry, it's a lot to chew on. You set it up really well, you know, for them to think about the most important things as far as turfgrass fertilization goes. You might challenge me on some of these, and that's just fine.
Are these your summaries?
These are my summaries.
Great.
I say you challenge me, but I don't believe that. We spent the last 20 years together. So,
yes, we have.
So we know each other pretty well at this point. But here are my 3.
And given that we're the same age and your beard has no gray in it, go ahead.
We're not the same age. So number 1 for me, nitrogen rules all. Number 2, understand nitrogen technologies. I'm excited about those. The plastic coated products, Brian, the whatever it is, methylene ureas. There's a lot of different technologies out there. And then my last one here, new products, be skeptical and ask questions. We've seen a big push for carbon fertilization, and we've talked about that. We see way too much. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
Stabilized sources, carbon sources. So stabilized sources are trying to enter the market or be a dominant player in the market with the understanding that it is a slow release product, but it is not. It's just urea. And so it's just urea, but it's stabilizing keeping it as an ammonium source in the soil rather than it being converted to nitrate. So it's not slow release. A pound of urea is the same as a pound of a stabilized urea. So just, carbon stabilized, and just be skeptical of some of these things.
We love fertilizer salesmen. We really do. And there are a ton of great fertilizer salesmen out there. In some cases, they might be confused on exactly what their products are doing for you. So to that point, Brian, with the stabilized stuff, it's not slow release, be skeptical and ask questions and trial things out before you buy a bunch of it as well. But what would you say, Brian, to that first point? I kind of cruised through all of them, that first point there.
Nitrogen rules, but not to the extent where nitrogen does not need to be applied in high amounts. But nitrogen being the only source of nutrient, if that's what you're saying here, I don't disagree with that. You can get away the majority of the time with letting the soil feed the plants with the nutrients that are in the soil. They're not locked up. They're not available. The nutrients in the soil will supply the plant's nutritional needs, and then nitrogen can be your supplemental that you add to the top.
That's where I was going with it. I think if you really spend a lot of time or whatever time it takes to get your nitrogen program where it needs to be, then I think a lot of the other issues you've been dealing with will not be there potentially. So that's the right timing, the right source, the right rate, all those different things that Dr. Horgan talked about in the lecture there. But the other thing I was trying to hit with that first one, Brian, is, and I know like for the minimum levels that we talked about, those minimum levels of sustainable nutrition, some of those calculations from Pace Turf and Dr. Michael Woods, they're recommending all your other nutrients as a ratio of how much nitrogen you're putting down, because nitrogen dictates growth and therefore uptake and utilization need for all these other nutrients as well.
Yeah, but Sam, if your soil's got 150 pounds of potassium per acre in it, and you're putting down 2 pounds of N a year, that doesn't mean that the minimum level for sustainable nutrition ratio of N to K of being 1-to-1, you have to do that. So if you're on a sandy soil or a high leachable soil or a really high quality field that gets a lot of play and a lot of wear, and you're at 5 pounds of N or 6 pounds N, then absolutely you got to bring everything up in ratio with your nitrogen, because nitrogen's going to dictate what else the plant needs. That's just my take on it.
No, I think that's great. No, I agree 100%. You bet. So let's see here. Just a comment from Corey also mentioning, like Colin, that new to the industry, a lot of information presented in this course was incredible. Thanks for that, Corey. Can't wait to test out the knowledge I've gained in the sports turf world this season, Corey says.
There you go, Corey. Yep.
So thanks. Keep us posted. Definitely keep us posted. All right, let's see.
Corey, don't forget to take that test at the end too, because we're really curious if the information we gave you over the course of these last 8 weeks is 8 weeks, Sam, or 10? 10 weeks, that there's been a knowledge transfer. And if it hasn't worked, given your enthusiasm for your job, then we have to change what we're doing.
I don't know why it's not allowing me to post those. There, Brian, bear with me for, okay, here we go. So next topic, session 5, abiotic stresses. And actually what you'll see is the flow of our different topics kind of flow with your general turf management practice textbook type of things as well. But abiotic stresses is quite often overlooked. We always want to identify a disease or an insect or something else that's causing an issue there. So my 3 for abiotic stresses are, most turf issues are related to abiotic stresses. The biggest one here is Mother Nature, right? Winter, summer, that type of thing. Many of the stresses are out of your control, but you can prepare your turf for them. So it's good practices going into winter. It's being cautious and reserved about mowing practices, for example, in the middle of the summer. Raise your heights, mow less frequency, play a lot more defense during that time of year. That's not the best time of year for our cool season turf grasses. And then the last one I have here is most abiotic stresses will have pattern to them. The add-on to that is, once you've identified a certain pattern, you should be able to solve the problem. And once you've figured out what's going on there, move on to the next lawn, the next problem, the next scenario. But if I see straight lines of salt damage on boulevards, if I see localized compaction stress, we're going to identify that problem, we're going to fix that problem, and then we're going to move on. We don't need to dwell on anything. But the pattern factor is really interesting. Irrigation issues happen in circles, typically. Sprayer issues happen in straight lines, and those are all abiotic type of stresses. So those are my 3. But Brian, what do you say on that first one? So most turf issues are related to it. Do I even need to mention that, I guess?
No, I mean, that's the majority of what we see. And people send in pictures and they're like, God, what's going on here? It's got to be a disease. Or I think I got insects from my neighbor that he hasn't been putting any fungicides or insecticides down. Yeah, Sam, I think that's tends to be the majority of what we see. Dull mowers. I mean, the number of times people say my yard is brown. When I drive around the corner and I look at my yard, it looks brown. Well, if you go look at those leaf tips and see them all shredded. Sharpen your mower.
Right. Right. So some basic stuff here, certainly. But we see a lot of abiotic stresses be misdiagnosed. And that's kind of where I get on that point of,
well, they're not easy to diagnose from a picture. When someone takes a picture of an individual plant and says, "What is this?" It usually requires looking at the full spectrum of a lawn and a landscape in order to identify an abiotic stress.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, a lot of them are out of your control, certainly, but hopefully you gain some knowledge about some of these practices that you can do to really stack the odds in your favor, I guess, Brian, right? So summer months, you're not fertilizing, you're not spraying herbicides, that type of thing. It's really that hang on time. And you reduce mowing frequency. Sharp mower blades are more important in the summer than they are any time of year, I would assume.
There's always going to be that issue where a disease happens or insect populations increase to a point in which you need to apply something, or a weed pressure gets out of control because you're not doing something else. But oftentimes it's an indicator of one of these other practices that you've learned about over this 10 weeks that is not going, the compacted soil, or you're not focused, you don't have enough nitrogen out there, or too much nitrogen out there. Oftentimes it's a good indicator of why these abiotic stresses are showing up.
I love that indicator topic. I don't think you can talk about that enough, actually.
No,
we talk about it a lot for weeds. And Dr. Patton, his book there, that turfgrass control for professionals, turfgrass weed control for professionals that he gave to everybody. I'm not sure what page it's on, but page 20 or 25, somewhere in that area, he has a great list of the indicator weeds and what type of site conditions that would lead you to correct.
Yep.
There are not good lists like that for diseases and insects, Brian, but we do make some of those recommendations, right? So for there are groups of low nitrogen diseases that Dr. Koch talked about, dollar spot, red thread, things like that. Yeah. There are groups of high nitrogen diseases as well. So, but the main point, the indicator idea, these things can spontaneously come out of nowhere, but quite often there's some type of environment or management issue that causes them to occur at a greater rate.
Well, I would also challenge our younger turf managers here in this class that keep kind of track of where you're at today, because in the course of your career, you're going to see pest patterns change dramatically because of some of the climate change things that are happening. So kind of just keep track of where you're at and be willing to adjust as you see these things occurring around your area.
I don't even remember knowing what a white grub was 15 years ago. Now it's the number one insect issue we deal with, Japanese beetle white grubs.
I moved to Minnesota in 2001, and no one applied an insecticide. Even on golf courses, no one applied an insecticide. And now you're right, it's the number one pest problem.
Yeah. All right. So getting in now to Dr. Rozzi's lecture. So mowing and secondary cultural practices. So that's the dethatching, the aerating, the top dressing, that type of thing. Pretty fascinating lecture there from one of the best, Brian. And I don't know why my connection's being a little bit slow here, I guess, or whatever. But I'll just, as it's loading, I'll list them off here. So my first one. Some little glitch in the system. My first one, here we go. Of all the cultural practices used to maintain turf, mowing has the greatest influence on plant growth and lawn turfgrass quality. Of all the cultural practices we use, I think it has the greatest influence. So just understand that. To me, a statement like that just reiterates the points we've kind of already touched on a little bit. Mowing is a stress. Grasses have adapted to defoliation over time through grazing, basically through cattle, through grazing practices. Probably wasn't cattle back in the day, but
what's it, Sam?
Sheep, maybe goats. Was it cattle always?
No, I don't know. I'm just asking you.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Have to ask
Frank. Yeah, I'll have to ask Frank.
Yeah, Frank. Anyway. So just keep in mind the importance here, and that goes from everything to mowing heights. Real mowers might come into play for some of your shorter cut stuff. Definitely sports fields, Brian. You get a better quality of cut with those. But it's gone are the days of where it's just jumping on the machine and hacking some grass down. We're a heck of a lot more sophisticated than that nowadays. And hopefully Dr. Rossi's lecture, open your eyes to that, I think, is the comment I'll have there. Adjust mowing practices based on seasons and stresses, very, very important to hit that. And then as Frank touched on, rethink the whole dethatching and shallow core aeration type of programs. This spring thing that we do in the spring of the year with these big heavy machines when grasses, lawns are still almost dormant, and they haven't started growing at all, and we run all over them and do this dethatching, is incorrectly called dethatching, right? It's more like what would you call that, Brian?
Debris removal.
Debris removal, I guess. If you actually have a thatch problem, you need a vertical mower, and that's a fall practice, typically.
And cut your nitrogen off for the next 3 years.
If you have a thatch problem. But
yeah.
how often do you see thatch problems in
see thatch problems when you have an irrigation system that's set up on a commercial landscape where there's no traffic. That's where you can walk out to any one of these banks that have these nice lawns out in front. You see the wear patterns of the tracks of the mowers that have burned in these paths. And you can go out and you can pull that grass right off the surface because they irrigate every day, they fertilize, and there's no wear.
Sure, you bet. So in that case, you might even be looking at phrase mowing if a vertical mower won't do it for you. I know Frank talked about that a little bit, I think, but
hey, one thing though on this though, greatest influence, I don't disagree. Mowing has the greatest influence on plant growth and lawn quality. The greatest potential influence of a cultural practice to improve overall turf stand, I would argue, is good aeration.
Okay, and I'm with you 100% there. I don't think we aerate lawns enough. I think we grab that jug off the shelf to solve a knotweed problem when we should be grabbing the aerator out of the shed. I didn't feel like in our live discussion that Dr. Rossi and I forget who else was on board with that were 100% on board. They think to some extent lawn aeration is overemphasized.
Oh, but come on, think about the lawns that we're dealing with here in these landscapes or these parks, highly worn areas. I'm not saying it has to be a uniform application. Look at your site indicators on your specific property as a way in which you can go out and do individual site management and not do the whole property. But we know we have compaction problems on the majority of our landscapes. And the only way you're going to correct that is to change the soil health and increase the aeration in that soil.
Agreed 100%. So I would advocate for more aeration and for most of your lawns at least once per year type of thing. But going back to that discussion, just running over the lawn with an aerator is not what we're looking for, because most times we're looking at an inch depth, 1.5 inches, and really wide spacing. So you want to focus on good, nice, close spacing and as deep as you really can go. There are no risks there, or there are no negatives. The only negative that I could think of over aerating a lawn, for example, Brian, would be weed pressure.
Okay. But I can manage that. I can manage that for 1 year.
Right. So that's the only negative with aerating, but a lot of your problems will be solved with aerating. Definitely.
Yep.
So think about that. All right. Now we're getting into Dr. Patton's lecture on weed management. And 3 that I pulled from this, and wow, Brian, back to that, one of the things I'm grateful for, the knowledge of each of you. Dr. Patton is, as we know, he's the weed man for the Midwest, and
he's the weed man for all cool season grasses.
Yeah. So if you ever get a chance to attend one of his lectures, or even reach out to him and have a conversation with him, I think you'll really value it.
And I would just add, while you're pulling this up, that Aaron is one of the most approachable faculty that we have in this country.
You bet.
He will take the time, and he will answer your emails. And if he can't answer on the email, he's going to pick up a phone and give you a call. So don't shy away from weed questions. Take advantage of Aaron and his expertise.
And the publication is really good.
Sure.
Fantastic with all the collaborators they have on that now. So, so my 3 take-home points for weed management. Number 1, understand weed biology. It will make control much easier. Timing of applications is what I'm looking at there, and also how you time your other lawn care practices based on when the potential for weeds is there, right? We think about this a lot, Brian, in golf, right?
Yep.
If we're going to do a renovation on a golf course, we dang well better be sure we're not doing it when there's good potential for annual bluegrass to germinate, type of thing, right? So we like to do some of those in the middle of the summer when annual bluegrass germination potential is low, bentgrass germination is high. Hopefully we end up with the right population coming out of that. But definitely got to understand the weed biology. I will tell you, if you're out there trying to control crabgrass with a post-emergent product in August or September in my area, you might as well save your time and money and your clients' money, because it dies with a couple good frosts in the fall. The comment that I get there quite a bit is, well, isn't that seed going to add seed to the seed bank in the soil? Shouldn't I kill it before it goes to seed? The amount of seed from those crabgrass plants is negligible compared to the amount of seed in your soil seed bank, Brian. Right?
Well, let's also hold on one second. Commerce, they got to deliver the cars. Good old Detroit. The other issue with an August application of a post-emergent on crabgrass is the density and size of those plants. You tend not to even kill it with one application. Then you're doing a follow-up application with the second post-emergent control. And now you start getting into issues related to too many of the same products being applied at too great of a frequency, and resistance issues of these weeds, which we don't have a lot of in turf. But I can tell you the folks in this building that deal with agronomic resistance to herbicides for our weed populations in our corn, soybeans, wheat fields is tremendous. So yeah, be smart about the biology of the weed and know when's the right time to apply a product.
Number 2 for me here, healthy turf equals fewer weeds. I think in Dr. Patton's 7-step weed control, thought process, it was number 3 or 4 in there. It's a little bit of a cliche at this point if you've been in the industry long enough, but Brian, time and time again, I mean, it's really the biggest crabgrass pressures I see is when mowing quality was bad in the spring of the year, right? You open
mowing quality was bad, or along boulevards and sidewalks where salt pressure was high and grasses didn't grow in before the crabgrass got to take it, it got taken hold. So yes, absolutely.
So use those Band-Aids, which are herbicides. They're tools to help you, but once you right the stand or control your weeds with those herbicides, if you can get on to providing the best environment for your grass possible, you're going to have less of those issues occur. Not saying that it's going to reduce the number of trips you're making to a homeowner, because that might be how you're billing them, right? So you still need to make money, but instead of going out there and doing a blanket application with a product, 3-4 times a year type of thing, you might be only spot treating, or you might be doing something else, right, Brian?
Oh, I love the idea of this spot treatment. And again, thinking about our younger turf managers in next 5 years, of dropping off a robot on someone's yard that goes and identifies the weeds and sprays those while you're down the street doing something else on somebody else's property. I mean, it's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's absolutely going to happen.
You don't need to be all geeked up about this technology as some of us folks are, but you definitely can't be resistant to it, because some of it's going to be the new norm. You
can get on board, or you can just watch it go by.
Right. But just the other point here, if the lawn has 1% dandelions, why the heck are we spraying herbicide over 100% of the lawn, right? So you'll be able to save your company money. You'll be numerous benefits. The environmental angle is the one that Brian and I always play, because we want to be sure we're not harming the environment. And though we're comfortable with a lot of our products that are out there, the less we can use of them, the better in general. I think.
We're going to be.
Yeah. And then my third point here, educate yourself on the products you're using so you can respond with confidence to questions you're asked. Your clients probably know less about this stuff than they used to, but they think they know more. And that's the concern, because they see the newspaper headlines, they see the lawyer ads on TV, and we're opening up a little bit of a can of worms here. But
I would argue that point, though, that the customers know less. I think customers have access to more information today, and they will challenge you as a turf manager, and you have to be prepared, like you say here, to respond in confidence, because they've probably done their homework too, especially if it's somebody like my wife who would say, no, we're not putting a herbicide down. Did you just put a chemical, a poison in my yard? How do you respond to that? So,
and you're right. So that was incorrect from my part. They know more. What I was trying to get at is they're what they do know is a little bit clouded.
Sure. Absolutely. Definitely clouded, but they have access. You write on your little sheet that you stick in the yard for 24-hour dry period, and you put the name of the product on there. I would imagine some people go back inside and pull up that product just to see what you put down.
And I will tell you, if you're out there spraying lawns or granular fertilizing lawns or whatever it may be, you better know what you're putting down. If you run into me in that environment, you're going to get a hell of a time from me. You're going to get a hell of a time from Brian if you don't know what you're applying. How do you know what other plants to be concerned about, if you don't know what is in your tank? How do you know the importance of keeping this stuff off of impervious surfaces if you don't know what's in your tank? So if your employer is resistant to telling you what's in there for some reason, you got to come back to this.
First of all, it's against the law, because you have to have MSDS sheets and have access to MSDS sheets in the label whenever you're putting a product down. So you can't be in the blind when you're out. If someone mixes the tank for you and you have no clue what you're doing, and they just say, go do this on these 15 lawns, you got to know what's in the tank.
Yep, you bet. So no, that's great stuff there. We'll leave that at that for weed management topics.
How many more topics we got? Because we're
2 more.
Sweet.
Yeah,
God, we planned this perfect.
Almost like you and I have done this before.
Almost.
Thanks for tolerating our humor here, gang.
Yeah.
It's not much, but we've got.
No, it's not.
So again, fairly large topic here for one session, but insects and diseases. Yeah. Brian, we covered in one section with Dr. Williamson and Dr. Koch.
That is a ton of information.
Oops, I pulled the wrong one up there. It is, yeah. Here's where I kind of landed with those two topics. So, in the 6, 7, 8 years now, I guess, that I've been doing kind of turf consulting and extension type work, I don't know if I've recommended a fungicide for a lawn, maybe twice. Most of the diseases we deal with will go away, Brian. Dollar spot, rust, leaf spots, that type of thing. I'm usually not going to charge a homeowner for them, and I'm just trying to be a little bit more reserved with everything that's going out in the environment. You've been in turf extension for over 20 years. How many times have you recommended a fungicide for a lawn? Now, sports fields are different. You've got
different scenario. Yeah.
Yep.
Different scenario.
Yep.
One hand.
Yeah. One. So let 5 or less, certainly.
5 or less in 20 years.
Right. There are a few that we maybe our recommendations would change. Those are the soil inhabiting diseases in most cases, necrotic ring spot, summer patch potentially. But there are some of these just funky blights that have been going around a little bit, Brian. The latest one that we've been dealing with in Minnesota is this Ascochyta leaf blight.
Leaf blight, yeah.
Yeah, there are no fungicides for that. They're just good cultural practices to recommend. You really can't anticipate when it's going to come on. It seems to come on from some of the more healthy lawns, actually, the well-watered, well-fertilized lawns.
Yeah.
But usually you get good recommendations, and a lot of other people are dealing with those issues at the same time. Second point here, good cultural practices. You're hearing the same point here. Good cultural practices tremendously reduce disease and insect pressure. Disease loves to take over. Insects love to come in on stressed turf, Brian. And I think just to reiterate the good cultural practices.
Caveat: if you start to see your shrubs and bushes being eaten by Japanese beetles, there's probably in the near future a need for you to put down a grub control product. And it doesn't mean you have to do it every year, but you got to knock that population back. And unless we get a good minus 50-degree temperature in Minnesota that kills those overwintering grubs in the soil, those populations build every single year until something happens. And either Mother Nature knocks it back, which is a traditional approach in Minnesota or the northern states, or you're going to have to go to an insecticide once in order to knock back that population.
Well, and that's, so you're leading me into that third point there. So consider preventative approaches if you've had a history. Certainly, we're much more comfortable with the preventative options from a toxicity and effectiveness standpoint for insecticides. But wow, the insecticides and what we know about the toxicity of them, Brian, when we're talking about the environmental aspect, these are not the ones to go out and say, oh, my neighbor thought I had grubs, I just put an insecticide down. These are not those products.
No.
When you see all the headlines on herbicides and them causing cancer and all this type of things, most of that is bogus, because most of the herbicides work on photosynthesis, right? We don't photosynthesize. The insecticides, insects are much more closely related to us. So this is when we get into some of those toxic, more toxic type of categories.
Yep.
There are very, very safe tools out there, so I don't mean to scare anybody, but our preventative approaches are usually best with those insecticides. Okay. Then with the remaining 4 minutes, just the last topic taught by Dr. Patton, and I've taught these calibration and mathematics lectures before, and I really appreciate the way Dr. Patton worked through these and presented them to you. A lot of your heads might have been spinning a little bit if you're new to that, but definitely go back and revisit that and save that lecture if you can.
And the only way you get better at calculations is
to do them.
You got to practice them.
Yep.
Sit at the kitchen table with your kids when they're doing their third grade math, and you can practice your algebra, which is essentially what a lot of these calculations are for our turf grass calculations, and just practice them. Just keep putting scenarios in your head. I want to put this pounds of AI out per this acre using this volume of water. How much product do I need to put in the tank? I mean, just make them up in your mind. They don't have to be real, but make them up in your mind, and then just look at Aaron's information and work through them.
And when we say we've recommended fungicides maybe 2 to 5 times type of things, the number of times that you've seen misapplication errors, Brian, due to bad calibration or bad math.
Yeah, usually it's a herbicide. Yeah. Absolutely.
Very preventable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my 3 points on that topic, calibrate often. Okay. And to some extent, that might be in the spring of the year. You're going through and you're measuring how much water you're putting out over a certain area with your sprayer. But then if you need to verify that, you might be just putting the sprayer stationary and measuring, are the nozzles still putting out the same amount of water at 40 PSI or whatever that is. You don't need to go through a whole blown calibration again. But and along the same line with the calibrate often, be sure you know generally how much product or how much water should be going out on a size of property, because that's your one reference point. Hey, is my calibration way off? I used 3 bags. I should have used 1.5 bags. Well, if you don't know going into the job that you should be using 1.5 bags, how are you going to be able to catch yourself if calibration is off, right? Point number 2, measure twice, cut once. Whether that means have somebody I'm talking about math here to some extent, but whether that means have somebody double check your math for you before you're adding it to the tank. There's a lot of cost that goes with that, but definitely be sure you do the calculations twice, or you're measuring twice, whatever that ends up being, so you don't cause
Sam and I have been on research trials, standing out in the middle of a golf course and looking at the volume in our spray bottles and wondering why we have such little amount of water to be put out over these 3 plots. And we would sit there and then we would do our math again. And sure enough, we didn't do our math twice. We measured once. we didn't do our math twice, and we end up screwing up the trial, and then we got to send somebody back to campus to go and correct ourselves.
It happens. It's human.
It absolutely happens.
Yeah,
so we don't even follow the same rule all the time either, but I can tell you, you will be much more efficient with your job if you spend 5 extra minutes versus you and I having to spend an extra 2 hours waiting there for somebody to go back to campus and get the right amount.
And the last one that I have here is a little bit more than just a period at the end of it. But so throw out those measuring devices from dry products when the product is gone. And I actually, Brian, if you can just bear with me for just a second here, I did throw a few slides together, if I can get it opened up here, about this. So this is going to be new for some of you, but just a couple slides here. Share screen. And then there we go. And then screen 2. And here we go. Pull that down. Here we go. So just keep in mind that there are liquid ounces and there are dry ounces. So when we're dealing with liquids, we've got 128 fluid ounces per gallon. If we're dealing with weight, there are 16 dry ounces in 1 pound. Okay. So what happens is typically we'll let's see if I can move the next slide. I'll skip that for now, but well, no, let's stay here. So if I were to take and measure out dry ounces in a graduated cylinder, I'm going to get a totally different measurement than if I'm looking at something that is measured by weight. So what a lot of these companies will do is they will send on these type of cylinders that come with your dry products. You cannot transfer these at all from fluid versus dry, and you cannot use this Oust XP measuring device for any other type of granular dry product. These are meant for the specific products they came with, because they're acknowledging that most of you don't have a scale in your workshop. So they're trying to make measuring a weight of these easy by giving you a volume perspective here. But you can see these are the exact same products, and they must have had a different production run here. And the points where 1 ounce on each one of these is different. So they have different tick marks based on the weight and the density of some of these products. So don't keep these, my third point is, don't keep these things hanging around your shop at all. When you get a new product, use the new one, toss them out. Most importantly, be dang well sure you're not using these dry containers to measure fluid ounces. That should be done with a graduated cylinder. So that's all I was kind of looking for with that. Not talked about very much, but we see that as an error, Brian, quite a bit out there as well. Mm-hmm. One comment that came in here from Kyle as we were kind of just chatting along, I'll pull it up. So Kyle's asking, what do you think is the best way to break into the turf industry, in particular for athletic fields? For reference, I've been a corporate grunt for 20 years and have movie star looks. We'll use those movie stars.
I can see that, Kyle. Look at that. I mean, suit, tie, you're looking good. Corporate grunt.
Go ahead, Brian, if you've got something here, or I can start on it. The biggest thing I would say right now is, there are jobs. You know, unfortunately, because you have a lack of experience, Kyle, you've got to start.
No, well, you got to pick your sector. I mean, there are a lot of people who seek out the parks and recreation side of athletic field maintenance. They want that lifestyle, and you can go and get a job in a parks and rec department and have that be an entry point into what's next in your career. As Sam was alluding to before I cut him off, sorry, Sam, is that these high quality athletic field jobs, you want to be a sports turf manager for the Minnesota Twins, they're few and far between, and they're aspirational, and I applaud you if that's your goal to get to that point, but just know it's going to take a while.
I think if you do have visions for Major League Baseball or the NFL or whatever that may be, the best opportunity right now, would be an internship, I suppose, Brian. And
well, let's walk Kyle's little scenario. So he's a corporate grunt. He made a couple $1 million. He's doing fine. He's now relaxed. he can go back to school, get an online degree at one of the schools that comes with a year internship, and you can go and pick your ballpark or your football field to go do that at, and that would be an entry point into it. So you're going to spend a few of your dollars that you've been saving all these years to go back and have a shift in your career going forward.
And the only thing I think you were alluding to as far as getting there is there's probably a long line of people, Brian, that are next up for the head of target field, for example, that have spent their time and have got to that point. So, but there's plenty of sports fields all around. So it just depends on what the goal is.
Absolutely. When you think about our folks up in Blaine or out in Maple Grove or what's the one on the east side of the Woodbury. I mean, the size of their athletic complexes are ginormous.
Right. And
to go get some experience working with somebody that's knowledgeable in athletic field maintenance, and you might be starting at the bottom, but you'll very quickly be given lots of tasks because the size of their operations are huge.
I've never spent any time working on athletic fields. I've done, consulting on a lot of them, and I've got feel like I have a pretty good mindset around a lot of them. But what I'll say is it's maybe less work just because of sheer size compared to a golf course, but there's less room for error because, when it's that Friday night game, all eyes are on your patch of grass. But I will tell you, if you're dealing with baseball, Larry DeVito, the head groundskeeper of the Minnesota Twins, he'll tell you he spends 90% of his time on the dirt and 10% of his time on the grass. I think the grass is the easy part. Getting the right moisture and consistency in the dirt is, where more people play is a bigger challenge there. So anyway, good question, good stuff. Great Lakes Turf School, Brian, might get your foot in the door to some extent, but this is a short course for turf, right? It's not a university degree. So what you're referring to when you say go do an online, you're talking about Penn State or Rutgers and getting an associate's type of degree.
Where they have 2-year online programs would be Penn State primarily, or they have 2-year associate degree programs. We have one at Michigan State. There's one at Rutgers. There's one at Penn State where you can do in person. So there are 2-year programs that have really excellent internship opportunities that are a part of it. But I don't disagree with you. Great Lakes Turf is a really good refresher or pique your interest type class. And it's not meant to be something where you can go show a certificate or an associate's degree to an employer.
Well, and it kind of weeds out to some extent some of the people who thought they wanted to be educated in turf and realize in this 12-week short course, hey, this is maybe a little bit more than I want to get into. And so some people take a different route after all this education as well. And that's perfectly fine too. But sounds like, at least from Kyle, that we might have piqued your interest a little bit throughout the schools. So
yeah, and I need to get his phone number because if he could be a potential donor, if he's made all that money in the corporate world. Yeah,
you're good at fundraising, Kyle. Plugging that. So that's what I had, gang. So again, a lot of you probably found some much needed free time on your hands. So definitely feel free to focus on the turf school and get it done here this week. But we'll keep the website open. I'll give everybody, at least a week or two of advance notice before we close down the school website. So feel free to keep working through it. When you do complete everything, that means all the quizzes, the post test, and I will hunt you down for the evaluation as well. Try to get that evaluation done because we really need that data, but just to try to improve it for the future years. But we'll get the certificate out for you then as well after you've completed everything. So quite a few of you are there, and we'll get those sent out, and some of you have some work to do still. So Brian, good times. Thanks for
taking a good year.
We'll kind of leave it at that, and to
stay in touch, everybody. Yeah.
Just try to stay safe, and I think the other thing that both you and I would say is we're growing grass here, so be sure you protect your family and friends first and foremost. In today's day and age, I guess it's amazing how much things have changed in a couple of weeks here, but we'll get through it. Yep, we'll get through it, and just wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam, for putting this on.
Yep, you bet. All right, we'll catch you later, Brian. See everybody else. Thanks for joining live, and for those of you viewing it as a recording, reach out. We're here for you. thanks for taking the turf school this year. Hopefully it was what you wanted. Signing off, Brian and Sam.